Hello fellow rats, Dingle here. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to make a game. However, there's one problem. I didn't know how to make one. So at the bright age of 8, little Dingle decided to make a game on Roblox, which ended up being total shit. In case you're wondering how it looks, here's a screenshot. Fast forward to my middle school science fair. At that time, I recently discovered a new programming language called Java, which I fell in love with. So I immediately knew what to do. Make a small computer science project in Java. Having to make this game for a science fair meant that I was under a time constraint, so I didn't really have time to learn all the quirks and twerks of Java. Instead, I decided to enter tutorial hell with a tutorial by RyiSnow. RyiSnow did a really good job at explaining many concepts, however I never really listened to that and just copied his code. This was probably one of the worst decisions I could have made in hindsight, but either way, I moved on. I moved all the way until episode 10, which resulted in me having a little game where you have to collect 3 keys, open 3 gates, and open a chest. It was kinda like a speedrunner. I did end up making some of my own assets just to hide the fact that I used a tutorial, but it didn't really help my case. On the day of the science fair, I unfortunately got sick, so either way, my game was never reviewed. A little sad that my game was put to no use, I decided to expand the game into an actual game. I started off with the lore. The main character, Torgray, accidentally spills soup on a world-protecting orb. The orb breaks, causing eternal darkness, which also causes monsters to spawn. Now Torgray's goal is to restore the orb across different levels or villages called trials. The way you restore the orb is by collecting shards, which you can get from exploration, mini-bosses, and the final boss. Each shard makes the game harder, making sure the game's difficulty matches your power level. I want the general game loop to be fight strong monsters that you can't beat, get stronger, making sure you can beat those monsters, collect the shard, and repeat. The game will be called Torgray's Trials, because Torgray has to go through trials to restore the orb. With the idea set, I moved on to development. I started off with Drakors. Drakors are basically cute slimy creatures, and they attack you and they drop soups upon death. Soups in my game will be basically potions. Each soup has a different effect and each entity has their own soup. For instance, Torgray soup simply heals them, but Coiner soup gives you more coin luck, etc. Coins are the currency of Torgray's Trials. You can buy many useful stuff with them and they're also dropped by monsters. Coiner will be the vendor who sells you all of the useful items, and he's a cute little character, and of course, he loves coins. I decided to keep some of the old features, but temporarily as I'm thinking of removing them, such as gates with keys and the chest that now contains a sword. And also, remember the time when I stole sprites from RyiSnow? Well, that bit me back in the butt because I had to rework them since they weren't licensed for commercial use. The sprites were actually made in Blockbench, which might be a little surprising to some since Blockbench is actually a 3D modeling software mostly used for Minecraft mods. However, I found it really useful to use it for sprites as it was free and the sprite editor was actually pretty good. I've since did switch to Asprite, which is a far superior platform as it's actually made for sprites. However, Blockbench had a pretty good run. I've also got some help from my friend Uso Studios, who's actually a good friend of mine. He's working on a game called No Way But Down in case you want to check that out. He actually recently released his first devlog, which is linked in the description. Spent a year developing my game, however, despite that time spent, it's still far from my intended vision. Many core mechanics such as the inventory system, the combat system, and many more just don't feel good yet. The orb mechanic hasn't even been implemented yet, and the game is more like an RPG rather than in my intended vision for a survival game. Additionally, copying RyiSnow's code bit me back in the butt because it was using bad practices according to Uso Studios. After much debating with him, I decided to make my decision. That sounds so weird. My decision was rewrite the whole entire game. Though you might think, dude, you're absolutely insane. This is actually a really good thing for my game, because rewriting the code gives me a very solid foundation to build new features upon, including but not limited to cursor-based UI, translations, and sprite sheets. After the rewrite, features should be developed a lot more faster.
FBI, open up!
since I don't have to rewrite a part of my code base just to implement a new feature like I did have to before. Although I come a long way since the science fair prototype, I still have a bunch of work remaining. For instance, I'm currently restructuring my entity system to make it more modular and functional, which should hopefully speed up development as well. In general, I'm working on a lot of backend stuff, so don't expect a lot of devlogs because I'm not working on a bunch of flashy new features yet. If you watched until this point, I would like to thank you so much for watching this devlog. It has been a dream to finally get an audience for my little game. I also made a Discord server where I'll share a lot of the progress I've made on my game in there, and also some prototypes that you can check out and test out for suggestions and feedback. If you want to test out the version pre-recode, you can also check out my GitHub page linked below. I'm also planning to release an itch.io page in the next 2 episodes, so subscribe to see that. Last but not least, thank you so much for watching this devlog. Have a wonderful day. DingleTheRat, running off. Goodbye everyone.